Senior project presentation. I'm so thrilled to see such an awesome audience for her. Just a reminder to make sure that your phones are on silence in a way so they're not a distraction at all during the, I was about to say performance, but during the presentation. And let's go ahead and wish Lucy good luck.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Lucy Stover, for those of you who don't know me, and I would like to thank you for coming to my senior project presentation on theater and education. The essential question I chose to focus on was how can theater be used as an effective teaching method, with sub-essential questions of how does theater appeal to different methods of learning, how does theater promote empathy, why is empathy pertinent to education, what is applied theater, and how can theater be used to educate students on a topic as personal as sexual abuse. I was inspired to research this topic by a few things. Theater has been a passion of mine for my entire life, and I've been performing for 13 years. I've always known that my senior project would have to incorporate theater. Over the course of these past 13 years, I have spent my time on the stage performing. But the work of my mother, who is also a theater director, has inspired me to step out of my box and into the realm of backstage work. I've always wanted to explore the task of directing and producing, and this project gave me the perfect opportunity. I wanted to prove to you, my audience, that theater is more than just an extracurricular. It is dynamic, it is empowering, and it is extremely effective when used appropriately. Lastly, I was inspired by the #MeToo movement and the need to break the stigma around the conversation of sexual assault and mental illness in our society. I will get more into this later on when I explain my applied piece, but in order to understand theater and education, we must start from the beginning. While theater itself was invented a long, long time ago, theater and education is a rather recent topic. Theater and education, or TIE, originated in Britain in 1965 and has continued to grow in popularity. TIE, in its rawest form, is simply theater performance in an educational setting. But throughout the years, theater and education has spawned into several areas its originators had never dreamed of. Theater is now being used to educate in preparatory schools, preschool programs, businesses, and even medical schools. At a university in Virginia, a program called Clinical Empathy is using the power of theater to educate their future medical practitioners. It is a program where students engage in improv with actors acting as patients in order to build more positive doctor-patient relationships and improve their conversational skills. This is a perfect example of theater pushing students out of their comfort zones and allowing them to practice their skills and even make mistakes in a completely theoretical environment where they can be easily observed and coached. Although all of these aspects of theater and education were very intriguing for me to research, I really wanted to make an impact on my community, which of course is the high school community. So I began to look for more examples of how theater can be used in education in a high school setting specifically. And I found out that St. Paul's School in Concord used theater to educate their students and faculty about sexual assault after several sexual misconduct allegations began surfacing in 2015. After some digging, I was able to find the actual show company that their administration hired to perform for their entire school. I even found follow-up articles explaining the effectiveness of this new program and how students were benefiting. Now that I had found a more concrete example of how theater in high school education specifically, I was able to break down how it worked. I believe that the current strategies utilized to educate are too uniform. A constant stream of lectures, textbook readings, and busy work implement mere facts into our brains instead of knowledge. In order to truly understand material, a student must fill that gap between text and real life. Theater could be the bridge. It is well known that there are three basic styles of learning: visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. Theater is a multifaceted medium that appeals to all of these learning styles. Kinesthetic learning takes place when students become actively involved in their material, such as when students participate in script readings and skits. This is a widely used strategy at Souhegan, and I'm sure many of you have read aloud Shakespeare in World Studies or performed a skit in biology. While many of us groaned and complained, kinesthetic learning is actually more effective for the majority of students than reading or writing tasks. Theater provides a reasonable environment for students to participate in these activities. To appeal to the visual component is simple. Theater is inescapably eye-catching, even to the most reluctant of learners. Theater transforms words to art. Spectacular displays of set work, costumes, and body movement are just a few ways productions catch the audience's gaze. These visuals are not only entertaining, but help the viewer to remember key concepts and terms throughout the show. It has been proven that by associating a term with a striking visual improves one's chance of remembering it by tenfold. The gains are even more valuable if there is an auditory component. The dual sensory approach of targeting both the eyes and the ears could be a tremendous advantage. With this technique, visual and auditory learners are catered to simultaneously. Students stay engaged and can hear previously dull text come to life on stage. These listening skills can also improve students' ability to identify tone and inflection, both of which are important in school as well as in everyday life. This recognition leads to the most important benefit of theater, the incorporation of empathy. This is what I believe we are missing from school today, emotion. By mindlessly watching slideshows and scanning e-readings online, we cannot connect with our learning. We cannot understand what it feels like to be an immigrant in American history class, nor a troubled youth struggling with alcoholism and health. We need to see, hear, and feel that connection in order to fully understand the material. Empathy is everything. It is the driving link between theater and education. So the question became, how could I instill a deeper sense of empathy into the Souhegan community? I knew that my applied piece would have to fulfill this question. In order to find a place to start, I turned to my outside expert, Professor David Kaye. Professor Kaye has been teaching in the Department of Theater and Dance at the University of New Hampshire since 1996 and has extensive experience as both a professional actor and director. He is also the founder of 2 major drama companies on campus, both of which provided crucial information for my applied piece. The first of which is Wild Acts, UNH's only social justice theater troupe. They use the art of acting to promote social change and spread awareness of prevalent social justice issues in their community. The second of which is Power Play, an applied theater group that uses artistic technique to address issues around professional, personal, and institutional development. This program uses applied theater as a method to spark dialogue about institutional culture and improve performance in the workplace. In our conversations, Professor Kaye recounted inspiring stories of his group's work in office buildings, large corporations, and even in the police department, with applied theater as their tool. Now you might be wondering, what exactly is applied theater? In Professor David Kaye's words, applied theater is where acting meets education. Traditional theater is when the audience is simply the audience and the actors are simply the actors, but the applied piece is what comes next. As soon as there is interaction between the audience and the production itself, the show develops into an applied theater piece. It means that the theater itself is being applied to a realm outside of the norm, such as theater being used in education instead of simply entertainment. In Power Play, this meant that the actors would perform a skit catered to the issues prevalent in the audience's lives, and then the audience would be forced to interact with them. The audience was to ask questions of the actors that therefore made them ask questions of themselves. Things like, why did you decide to do that? That make the audience break down the difference between action and intention. Making this differentiation is the best way to be able to understand another person's point of view and why they might be doing what they're doing. The way it works is Professor Kaye's actors perform a bad version of the situation first. The audience points out the problems and actively gives solutions, and then the actors follow their advice and show them what would happen in real time. This real-time acting shows the audience how their actions can have immediate impact on other people. After hearing about Professor Kaye's experience with applied theater, I realized that I wanted to have an immediate impact on other people too. The best way for me to begin making an impact was to find a cause. This was not hard for me. I've been speaking out against sexual assault and the stigma around mental illness for quite some time, but this was my chance to make a real impact. I was tired of hearing the statistics. 1 out of every 6 women is a survivor of rape by the time they are 30. 63% of all sexual assaults go unreported out of fear and shame. Another person is sexually assaulted nearly every 92 seconds. I wanted to do something. So, in December, when I began searching for the perfect show, I looked for one with a central theme of mental and sexual health, because this is the topic I feel is most important in our education today. Currently, the students at our school, and most high schools, have a very warped view of both mental and sexual health awareness. With streams of information coming from televisions, social media, and peers, it can be very difficult to understand what to believe. As these topics are highly emotional, I think that theater is a very fitting teaching method. There are things you simply cannot grasp from a textbook or another sex ed video from the 90s. Things like empathy, which is the exact skill I'm trying to promote. By producing a show on sexual assault, I would be able to apply my new knowledge of how theater can be used as an effective teaching method, as well as do something I feel very passionate about. So I picked a show that would allow me to do just that. At the beginning of January, I started the process of directing and producing the show Have You Heard by Krista Boehner. This show is set in a typical high school setting, just like Sauhegan, and shares the innermost dialogues of 5 distinct high schoolers. Fighting dire issues such as sexual assault and emotional abuse, each character is in a battle with themselves as well as the world around them. They are desperate to answer the question, what makes a secret more powerful, when it's the truth or when it's a lie? It is a monologue-based one-act show, meaning that the characters never actually spoke to each other, only to the audience. This was the exact type of show I was looking for. Something raw and emotional, and the monologue style would compel the audience to latch onto the storyline unlike any other play has before. This show would help teach students empathy, how to have empathy for other people experiencing troubles that they themselves may never have experienced before. And it would teach them that having problems is normal. It was okay to not be okay all the time, and they didn't need to go through the hard times alone. After deciding on this message, I jumped right in. I hired a crew, reserved rehearsal spaces, advertised auditions, held auditions, selected a fantastic cast, created a rehearsal schedule, had several meetings, and then dove right into rehearsals. I was beyond thrilled to have found a cast that was as passionate about this topic as I was, and they were all in for putting in as much time as needed to make this performance spectacular. We usually rehearsed 3 days a week for about 2 months, and even during free periods when we could. In the beginning, rehearsals were individual and solely focused on accurately portraying the emotions of each scene. My assistant director, Alyssa Saunders, and I spent hours preparing our actors to deliver heart-wrenching monologues without waiver. In order for my project to succeed, the audience needed to feel empathetic towards the actors. The best way to ensure this was through eye contact. As everyone knows, our eyes speak more truths than our mouths, so we began working on eye contact skills, so that every single one of our actors could cry and make direct eye contact with an audience member at the same time. As you could guess, that is not an easy task to master. Once I watched one of our actors, Audrey Powers, deliver her hardest monologue while maintaining eye contact with me and crying the entire time, I knew we had something special. I wanted everyone else to know it too. If my project was going to work, we needed people to perform to, so I started spreading the word. Social media is the key to every teenager's heart, and as this was our target audience, I took straight to Instagram. Here's a screenshot of our Instagram's homepage. You can see some of the many posts with advertisements, information, and Q&As. I was also sure to put the contact information for the suicide hotline, as well as Bridges Domestic and Sexual Violence Center in Milford. On the right, you can see an example of one of our campaigns I like to call Behind the Mask. You can see on the left is a photograph of Audrey, one of our actors, smiling, aka the mask. And on the right is a photograph of Behind the Mask. The caption gave insight into this specific character and gave our possible audience something to latch onto. The point was that we wanted to show that these characters were extremely relatable, and the feeling of hiding behind a mask was a lot more common than you'd think. Social media as a whole was a very effective way of communication, and I think the entire cast enjoyed using it to promote the show. It was also great practice for me as I will be studying media in college next year. I like to use the ocean as a metaphor for the show process because it's just like the turning of the tide. At auditions, the tide is way in the distance, and there is so much sand in front of you and all you want to do is run and jump and play. But as soon as you start rehearsing, the tide starts creeping in. Soon, you can see water imminently approaching, and your every waking moment goes to costuming, set design, and lighting. Then, suddenly, it's show week, and the tide's upon you. Waves crashing in every direction, and you need to learn how to float above the surface. And as the director, to build a lifeboat for your cast, too. Luckily, my previous experience with theater had prepared me for this, and I made it my duty to prepare my cast as well. However, it was sort of a bumpy ride. Going into this project, I thought the hardest part would be the show itself. I knew a lot went into a show between the costumes and the rehearsals, but I would be doing most of it all on my own. But the hardest part turned out to be the scheduling process. The sophomore grade was our target audience because they're the one who took the health curriculum this year. Unfortunately, because of their team classes, it was rather difficult to find a unanimous time that they could all watch the show at once. There was a lot of disagreement about what classes students should miss and which time would be best for the show. And I think I learned the hard way the power of clear communication and the importance of following up. Although it was frustrating, I think it was a very beneficial experience to have in high school when I had so many allies like my mentor, Julianne, who could help me through my troubles. Now, next year in college, I have some experience under my belt for communicating and defending myself in tough situations. Through this troubleshooting, we were able to find a compromise. Our show ended up being performed for 4 health and wellness classes over the course of 2 days, as well as film seminar and several other students and faculty who came during their free periods. As this show was filled with sensitive topics, I worked closely with Shilu, who was our social worker here at Souhegan, to develop a trigger warning that was read to students before they came to see the performance. Everyone had the option to opt out and had the ability to leave during the performance if they felt uncomfortable. In addition, I reached out to our contacts at Bridges Domestic and Sexual Violence Center, which is a local crisis intervention center for survivors of violence based in Milford, to see if I could get their representation at our performance. Bridges offers emergency shelters, support groups, education, core advocacy, and leadership programming. I believed that if I was going to bring up sensitive topics such as sexual assault, I also needed to provide the resources my audience needed to heal from these experiences. The whole point was to help survivors realize that they were not alone, so I needed to show them that. I was able to have Bridges representatives Amy Jo Muscott and Pam Smith come to all of my performances with a table filled with informational pamphlets, contact information, and anything else we could have needed. They also agreed to come to our Friday night performance on March 8th, at which we had over 200 people from the general public come out to watch. That night was truly amazing. I honestly do not think I could have been more proud than in that moment, when the show got a standing ovation. The show was a huge success, and though I wish I could show you the entire performance, here is just a small clip of the finale of the show, which truly shows the emotional depth the performance reached.
I don't want to be picked last,
pushed around,
left out,
left behind, walked on,
tossed aside, laughed at,
shouted to,
torn,
hurt, whipped,
scarred.
forgotten.
I don't want to.
Hear my name echoing the sounds of whispers.
Just give
Me. Silence.
And that's how it ended. Preceding the show, audience members were prompted to take a survey later that day in advisory. It was a short 10-question survey filled with both multiple choice and open response questions about the show. It was designed to be self-reflective, meaning that there were no right or wrong answers, and the show was totally up for interpretation. The survey got about 59 responses. This was made up of mostly upperclassmen, with about a quarter accounting for underclassmen, and the rest as faculty and parents. 2/3 of our sample pool had previously known someone in an unhealthy relationship, which is truly unfortunate, but meant that they had experience with this topic and were likely to fully understand it. This statistic also goes to show how important education on this topic is, because clearly unhealthy relationships are not uncommon. The 3 things I was looking for in the surveys were memory, impact, and understanding. Memory, first because I wanted to realize whether they actually took in what they just witnessed or whether they were kind of zoning out. Second, because I wanted to see exactly what they remembered. Throughout the rehearsal process, I worked hard to make sure that there were specific moments in the show that the audience would not forget. For example, the clip I just showed you was one of these moments. In these moments, where there was heightened emotion, and therefore heightened potential for empathy, I made very deliberate decisions about body positioning, blocking, and lighting. Through my research, I discovered that audience members are most likely to remember scenes with symmetry, fluctuations in sound, and large contrasts in lighting. That's why, in the last clip, you see all 5 characters spaced out perfectly. We ensured this with tape-marked spots on the ground. You see large fluctuations in noise between the characters individually versus when they chant together, and you see a large contrast in lighting from the spotlights to the darkness. This was all done deliberately because I wanted to see if it would work. Because as all teachers know, teaching a lesson is only worthwhile if the students are going to remember it. And I wanted to ensure that our audience would remember this moment. According to our survey, they did. When asked which scene they remembered most, every single participant said that they recalled either the clip I just showed you or one of the other 2 moments I had created in the show. It was spectacular to see that these deliberate choices were effective in terms of memory. They were also effective in terms of impact. The survey proved that people were truly impacted by this show. Here are just a handful of the many, many positive responses we received in the survey. I felt like my eyes were open to things that could actually be happening in my community. I thought the show was truly amazing, and that the message was powerful and needs to be talked about more. I felt hopeful, emotional, and empowered. I felt very empathetic towards all of the characters, but I also felt empowered knowing that I'm not alone in anything, and knowing that no matter the situation, I will be okay eventually. I loved the show, and I saw it twice, and both times were amazing. It is clear from these responses that the audience truly understood the point of this performance and were impacted by it in a positive way. The good results continued. The survey said that 89.8% of our audience members felt that the show helped them understand what it would be like to be a survivor of sexual assault. The other 10% answered I don't know, and no one answered no. I was ecstatic that the performance truly did help people understand the trauma of experiencing sexual assault, so that they now could feel more empathy towards those who actually have. This line of thinking proved to be true when the survey also said that 86.4% of our respondents felt empathetic towards the characters in the show, which was the exact purpose. I feel that this is very strong evidence that it is possible to teach empathy through theater. Theater is not just a silly extracurricular we use to pass the time. It is important, it is meaningful, and it could help us change the world. Finally, I'm very happy to announce that our performance raised $489 between ticket sales and donations on our Friday night show. This accounts for over 200 ticket sales, each of which were only $2 a person, and a few $100 in donations. All proceeds of which were donated to Bridges Domestic and Sexual Violence Center in Milford, so that the money from our show can continue to help raise awareness of sexual assault and mental illness in our community. Now, I would like to take a moment to say thank you to everyone who has helped me through this process. Thank you to my mentor, Julianne Mueller-Northcott, for always being there to help me through thick and thin. I'm so grateful for your help. Thank you to my panel, Robin, Lisa, and Travis, for all of your support. To the Bridges representatives who came to my performance, Amy Jo Muscott and Pam Smith. To Dave and Shilu for further helping my ideas and schedule our performances in class. To my cast and crew, I love each of you endlessly and truly couldn't have done it without your dedication to this cause. Thank you. To my assistant director and one of my dearest friends, Alyssa Saunders, thank you for keeping on my head straight and being my right-hand gal. I'm going to miss you so much next year. And to my audience, thank you so much for taking a chance on me and on our show, and for caring about this important cause. And finally, thank you to my friends and family for supporting me throughout this amazing process. I truly wouldn't have changed a thing.